August 22, 1969, Memphis, Tennessee. Inside the Mid-South Coliseum, more than 13,000 people roared as Elvis Presley returned to his hometown stage. But when the spotlight caught a single young fan in tears, the entire arena froze. What he did next turned chaos into compassion, and the eruption shook the building. The summer air in Memphis that August carried a sticky weight, thick with anticipation. Cars lined the streets around the Mid-South Coliseum, headlights stretching like a glowing ribbon, as families, teenagers, and veterans of earlier Elvis shows poured inside. The building itself hummed. Vendors shouted over one another, selling programs and soft drinks, while ushers in crisp uniforms tried to contain the tide of humanity. Inside, more than 13,000 voices rose in a single restless chorus. On the stage, velvet curtains framed the spotlight. At 8:35, the house lights dimmed, and the temperature in the room seemed to climb. Elvis Presley had returned to his hometown after his triumphant Las Vegas comeback earlier that summer. Memphis was not just another stop on the tour. It was the proving ground of a son who had left, conquered, and now returned with the eyes of the nation upon him. The first notes of blue suede shoes ignited the arena. Screams cascaded like falling glass, sharp and endless. Elvis, dressed in a cream-colored jacket and dark trousers, moved with a confidence that reminded everyone why they had come. James Burton's guitar sliced through the noise, Ronnie Tutt's drums cracked like thunder, and the entire Coliseum became one living instrument, responding to every gesture, every grin, every perfectly timed curl of the lip. But beneath the sound, something else pulsed. An awareness that this was not only music, but history being carved in real time. Parents whispered to children, "Remember this night." Teenagers clutched ticket stubs as though they were sacred artifacts. The set list promised hits, yet the hunger in the air stretched beyond songs. People wanted a piece of the man himself, something unforgettable to carry into tomorrow. Halfway through the second number, Elvis paused to adjust his microphone stand. The crowd followed his movements with collective breath. Even the smallest flick of his wrist drew a scream. From the wings, his longtime friend Joe Esposito scanned the first rows, ensuring no fan surged too far forward. Security was tight, but the energy was impossible to cage. The king looked out across the sea of faces, and for a moment the arena went dead silent, an almost unnatural hush in a space built for noise. Then the band crashed into "Love Me Tender," and the spell snapped. Couples clutched hands, soldiers on leave wiped their eyes. People swayed as if the song itself were stitching them together. And yet, among the thousands, there was one presence that broke the rhythm. In the front rows, a young woman clutched her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. At first it seemed like hysteria, the kind of overwhelmed reaction Elvis had seen countless times. But the tone was different. It wasn't ecstasy, it was sorrow, raw and consuming. The fans beside her shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to look away or intervene. The joyful tide of the evening met a sudden undertow. Something was out of balance, and though the band played on, eyes began to turn toward the anomaly. Have you ever felt a crowd breathe as one body waiting for something beyond music? That was the sensation in the Coliseum. As murmurs spread, Elvis leaned slightly forward on the mic stand, eyes narrowing toward the section. For a heartbeat, his focus wavered from the performance to the person. The crowd, sensitive as a living organism, noticed immediately. A ripple of uncertainty ran through the sea, and then someone in the front row began to sob. The song carried on, gentle and familiar, yet tension now curled beneath every note. Elvis could sense it, an energy in the room that had shifted from pure joy to fragile unease. His voice, steady as a river, wrapped around the lyrics of Love Me Tender, but his eyes stayed anchored on that single fan in distress. She was young, no more than 19, her face blotched with tears, shoulders trembling. The people seated nearby tried not to stare, though the spectacle of her sorrow was impossible to ignore. In a hall of more than 13,000, one girl's sobs had begun to compete with the sound system. Joe Esposito nudged forward from the wings, scanning the scene with concern. Security guards exchanged glances, unsure if they should intervene. Was it a medical emergency, a fainting spell, or just another case of Presley fever taken to its breaking point? But the truth was different. The girl's grief wasn't hysteria. It wasn't awe. It was heartbreak laid bare in public. And in the South, in 1969, grief carried its own kind of weight. The audience, once roaring, now felt suspended. Conversations rippled across the tears. Some craned their necks to see. Others whispered, half curiosity, half discomfort. The massive Colosseum seemed to shrink around her sobs, as though every echo was amplified. Elvis did something unusual. He let the band finish the song without the theatrics, without his usual smile or playful wink. Instead, he stood still, studying the girl as the last notes faded into the rafters. Then he lifted a hand to Ronnie Tutt, signaling a break. The silence was immediate, heavy. A performer's instinct might have been to keep the music rolling, to bury disruption under sound, but Elvis leaned into it. The crowd grew restless. Cheers mixed with unease. People wondered if the king himself was about to walk off stage. Elvis tilted the mic, lowered his voice, and asked softly, "Honey, are you all right down there?" The words, simple and unpolished, carried like thunder through the hush. Gasps fluttered through the arena. Never had he broken script so suddenly, so publicly. The band members looked at one another, unsure whether to prepare the next number or wait for a command. The girl buried her face in her hands. Her friends patted her shoulders, whispering frantically, but she couldn't stop trembling. For Elvis, this wasn't spectacle. It wasn't even performance. The son of Tupelo, who had once known hunger and loss himself, saw something deeper, someone drowning in pain, while surrounded by thousands who came to celebrate. The fans waited, caught between reverence and impatience. This was not the Presley they had expected. They came for swagger, for rhythm, for the flash of a man larger than life. Instead, they were witnessing stillness, a pause where the show cracked open and became human. A man in the back yelled, "Sing it, Elvis," but his voice was swallowed by the crowd's unease. The king didn't flinch. He stayed rooted, gaze fixed, as if the girl's suffering mattered more than the show itself. In that moment, 13,000 people felt the same paradox. The concert of a lifetime was suddenly no longer about music. The Colosseum air felt electric, but not in the usual way. Instead of anticipation for the next hit, there was uncertainty, an audience caught between awe and discomfort. Elvis Presley, the master of momentum, had let the stage fall into silence, and silence in a hall of 13,000 was louder than any note. The spotlight held steady on him. He shifted his weight, hand gripping the microphone stand, eyes never leaving the young woman. The band waited in limbo, instruments dangling in uneasy suspension. James Burton's guitar hung low against his chest. Ronnie Tutt's sticks hovered above the snare, all watching for a signal. None came. Elvis exhaled, a soft sigh barely audible, and then he broke the barrier. Stepping down from the riser, he walked toward the edge of the stage. Murmurs spread like a fuse being lit. Ushers moved instinctively, unsure whether to block fans or clear a path. But Elvis wasn't heading for a stage dive, nor for spectacle. His steps were deliberate, almost solemn. The girl in the front row had stopped shaking just enough to note, her eyes red and swollen, lifted toward him in disbelief. The king of rock and roll, this untouchable figure she had idolized from records and movie screens, was walking directly to her. The crowd gasped, then fell into a nervous hush. Even screams of adoration felt inappropriate. For once Presley commanded not noise but reverence. When he reached the lip of the stage, he crouched low, bridging the gulf between star and spectator, his hand extended, palm open, not as an icon but as a man. "You okay, darling?"